Welcome to History for Tuesday, January 5th. We're going to start with the reading, so go ahead and open up your books to page 220. And if you need to pause the video to find page 220, please do so because you need to be following along as I read. Okay, so pause the video, find page 220. Okay, when you get to page 220, you're going to see David Crockett and Sam Houston. This is another chapter where they've combined two people into one chapter. Top of page 221, it says two American heroes, David Crockett and Sam Houston, were alike in many ways. They both loved their country, worked hard, and bravely fought for freedom. Later in their lives, these two men became a part of the famous Battle of the Alamo. All right, so maybe you've heard of the Alamo or even been there. That's a place you can also visit. We will begin with David or Davy Crockett. He became known better as Davy. All right, so born in Tennessee. And there is a song written about Davy Crockett. It's called The Ballad of Davy Crockett. Born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, greenest state in the land of the free, raised in the woods so he knew e'er tree, killed him a bear when he was only 3. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. I sort of know it, but I don't really feel like singing it. All right, so do you really think he killed a bear? That's what it says. Killed him a bear when he was only 3. That's supposed to be the word bear. No. So sometimes somebody who becomes very famous becomes what they call a legend or a folk hero. And they sort of start making up some things about him that didn't really happen just to make him seem better than he really was. All right, so David or Davy Crockett was not actually born on a mountaintop, but in eastern Tennessee in 1786. Because the things he did in his life were very important, he became a folk hero when songs and television shows were written about him. And yes, I do remember watching this as a television show a long time ago. All right, so important words: folk hero, a person, real or fictional, who is admired by the people of a particular place for his accomplishments. So that's what he became. He was a real person, and he did really do some important things in history, but killing a bear at the age of 3, no. All right, so they made up some things to make him sound better. All right, and then important names: Davy Crockett, a pioneer and explorer who died as a hero in the Battle of the Alamo. Santa Anna, president of Mexico, who led his army against Texas. Sam Houston, which is the other man we're going to be learning about in this chapter, pioneer, soldier, and first president of the Republic of Texas. All right, so you got to remember, before Texas was a state in the United States, it was its own country. And the Battle of San Jacinto. I know that looks like a J, but remember in Spanish it's pronounced like an H, so San Jacinto. It's an 18-minute battle that Mexico lost against Texas. So Texas won the battle against Mexico. 18 minutes, that's not really that long for a battle, is it? All right, turn the page, 222. David's parents were pioneers. Their home was usually a one-room cabin with dirt floors. Everything the pioneers needed had to be handmade. His family worked from sunrise to sunset, and there was little time to play. Davy learned to hunt. He purchased his first gun when he was 17 years old. He named all his guns after his favorite sister. He called them Old Betsy. If a farmer needed a new barn, all the people who lived around were invited to come and help. This was called a barn raising. When the barn was completed, the pioneers had a frolic or a party. They shared a big meal, enjoyed music, and played games together. It was on one of these occasions that Davy met Polly, the girl he later married. David enjoyed hunting, and he was known as an excellent woodsman with a great deal of common sense. All right, so go ahead and look at the important places, and you see Alamo, a former Spanish mission that was used as a fort by Texas soldiers. And then Mexico, a country in North America that borders the United States. And if you remember the map, it is below, it's not going to be on this map because that's your Midwest states, but it is below Texas, okay, and some of those states over there. All right, Creek War. Down in Alabama, the Creek Indians, that's why it became known as the Creek War, went to war against settlers who built homes and towns along the Creek's tribal borders. Davy Crockett knew that if the Indians were declaring war in Alabama, it would not be long until the fighting came to Tennessee, where other Creek Indians lived. He joined this new war by signing up for the Tennessee Volunteer Mounted Riflemen. David Crockett served as a scout in the Creek War, which was part of the War of 1812. His job was to find where the Creek Indians were hiding and warn his group against an attack. During the war, he would take Old Betsy into the woods and bring back deer meat to feed the hungry troops. He also spent his own money to buy blankets for the troops. The Creek Indians finally lost the war and also lost much of their land, which is sort of sad because they were there first. Trouble at home. After the war, Polly Crockett became sick and died. Davy Crockett was left to care for their 3 small children. He later married a woman whose husband had died in the war. Together, they moved to a new home in Tennessee. It is said that everywhere he went, he was eager to see what was farther beyond the plain, over the mountain, or across the river. He needed to explore. Turn the page. Serving his country. He went off to Congress and served a spell, fixed up the governments and laws as well, took over Washington, so we heard tell, and patched up the crack in the Liberty Bell. Davy Crockett, seeing his duty clear. All right, don't think some of those things happened. We do know he served in government, but patching the Liberty Bell. All right, people liked Davy Crockett because, like them, he was a pioneer. He wore the same kind of clothing they did, and he spoke plainly. They chose him to serve Tennessee as a representative in Washington, D.C. Davy Crockett spent his first 2 years learning about his job in Congress, but before his term was over, he had learned to tell people what he thought and tried to make a difference. Although he did not really patch up the crack in the Liberty Bell, he was known for defending the Constitution. All right, stop and think. Davy Crockett did not always dress and look like the other men in Congress. Even though he did not dress a certain way, his desire was to serve his country. What qualities make a good leader? All right, so is it about how you dress? No, it's about what you do with your life. So even though he looked more like a pioneer than a congressman, he was a good congressman because he was trying to make a difference for the better. All right, and the Bible verse, read it with me. For the Lord seeth not as a man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. All right, so remember, it's not about how a person looks, but about what they do with their life. All right, let's review for the quiz. All right, so I'm going to ask a question and you need to answer it. Some of them might come from today's reading now, since we've learned about Davy Crockett. We're not completely finished learning about him, but let's see. Who wrote the first American dictionary? Noah Webster. First American dictionary, Noah Webster. Who was the pioneer from Tennessee who fought to free Texas? Now, we haven't learned about him fighting to free Texas yet, but the pioneer from Tennessee that we learned about was Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett. All right. Who wrote the poem Snowbound? John Greenleaf Whittier. And who wrote the book Little Women? Louisa May Alcott. It took 20 years for Noah Webster to write the first American dictionary. 20 years to write the dictionary. What were the 3 books that were usually found in a one-room schoolhouse? Bible, Primer, Speller. Bible, Primer, Speller. All right. And don't forget, you'll need to know the Midwest states. That will be on the quiz and on the test. All right, the first American textbook for children was called the Bluebacked Speller. The Bluebacked Speller. That's not what he called it. Noah Webster wrote it. He did not call it Bluebacked Speller. He called it the American Spelling Book. But it became known as the Bluebacked Speller. And the first American what took 20 years to write. Dictionary. The first American dictionary took 20 years to write. Who served in Congress as a representative of Tennessee? We just learned about him today. Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett. John Greenleaf Whittier wrote this poem. What's the name of the poem he wrote? Snowbound. Snowbound. And who wrote the first American dictionary? Noah Webster. Noah Webster. John Greenleaf Whittier's poems were set to music and were used as what? Hymns. That's one of our spelling words this week. They were used as hymns. Songs to praise God, right? Hymns. H-Y-M-N-S. Hymns. All right. Louisa May Alcott's home was a stop on the what? The Underground Railroad. Louisa May Alcott's home was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And Snowbound was written in memory of the author's what? His family. His family. All right, during the Civil War, Louisa May Alcott became a what? She worked as a nurse. A nurse. During the Civil War, she worked as a nurse. All right. A person, whether they're real or fictional, who is admired by the people of a particular place for his accomplishments is a folk hero. A folk hero. And sometimes they tell folk tales about him. A folk hero. Little Women was written by Louisa May Alcott. 4 volumes of Christian poetry expressing love for God were written by, who's the one we learned about that wrote poetry? John Greenleaf Whittier. The Blue-Backed Speller was written by Noah Webster. Noah Webster. Little Women was written about the author's what? Her family. Louisa May Alcott's family. Little Women was written about the author's family. All right, I want you to tell me the 3 books usually found in a one-room schoolhouse. This would be a short answer question on the test to tell me what the 3 books were. They were the Bible, the Speller, and the Primer. Remember, it looks like the word primer, but it's pronounced primer. All right, and then tell me why Noah Webster's first book became known as the Blue-Backed Speller. Because it had a blue cover. As easy as that, had a blue cover. All right, see you tomorrow.